Alright, so this should be the final video necessary for completing your tree sculpt in Blender, and then I'm going to show you as part of this video just exporting it so that you can bring it back into Maya for the next step. Now, I think I might have mentioned at the last video, maybe I'll make a few adjustments or changes. Let's see here. You can ignore this little thing. This is just a little pop-up I have that just basically does the same thing as just selecting sculpt tools over on the left there. So I'm going to go back to the snake hook and, maybe adjust some further stuff so that the contours and curves look a little more correct to me. Again, maybe I'll just get sort of more of a slope up there. Maybe taper that a little bit more so it looks a little bit more like a natural, end or tip to some of these branches or sub branches, stuff like that. Again, this snake hook is, I find, probably going to be your bread and butter kind of tool for a lot of the big kind of adjustments that you're making. You can see again, I can use that to sort of create that sort of like nice hints of bends, like little elbows. So it's not just it's not all snake-like and curvy, but it's starting to get some of that sort of natural, knobbiness or however you want to think of it to your branches. So that's all that. Again, I want to make sure I don't have any sort of crazy concavity here. Again, continue to sort of add some subtle variation to the parts, such as the trunk. Maybe just sort of taper it out a little bit more down there, something like that. Now, I have, I think I've mentioned in either in the previous video, certainly on the assignment page, that you have to have at least 5 branches and sub branches. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, if I count. Here's the 1, 2, 3, and there's the 4th, which is that little sub branch. So, what if you get to this point and you say, oh, I forgot to add in enough branches or sub branches, and it's already well past the time where you were using the previous technique at the previous stage, of using the skin and subdivision modifiers. So you could, again, I still have Dyn Topo enabled, you could kind of gently with that snake hook add in another branch. Just make sure, hit F again, and then pulling to the left to create a sort of smaller brush size. I can use this to create an extra branch, and you'll notice the way I'm doing this is doing it sort of slowly in a lot of little steps. It'll take a moment or two, but it'll work. You may notice that if you use this, it requires a lot of push, sort of turning your viewport around to make sure that you're getting a nice sort of roundness in all views. You may also want to switch over at some point to the inflate tool, and you can see that's kind of what it sounds like. It's just gonna inflate out. If you have any sort of flattened or thinner areas, it just sort of puffs it out. Again, could be useful for this. So I'm going to switch back again to my snake hook and sort of keep pulling out and sort of just creating my 5th branch this way. Again, you can see it's a lot more time consuming and tedious than just getting the number right at the first stage. So let's see here. I'm going to sort of try and do this a little quicker so you're not just bored sitting around watching me do all this. I'm getting close to my limit of how long I want to spend on this. Get a little smooth with the shift key. Switch over to inflate again to just sort of like puff this out a bit and make sure I don't have any really flat sections. And smooth it to kind of decrease that lumpiness. And then go back over to snake hook. Really sort of change. You've noticed how I'm taking the trouble to kind of go on the underside of the branches to create a sort of more natural slope. If you don't put that in, I found it looks really unnatural. It looks like you've got these strange, almost mechanical branches sort of poking out of the trunk, something like that. Again, maybe add in a little extra bend or sort of like elbow here and there, and then maybe taper it a little bit. So, okay, so now I've got enough branches. Now the other thing you may have noted, actually let me just, while I'm at it, just add a little more variation down at the base there, just to sort of create some more of those sort of suggestions of roots without actually creating the full roots. Oops, gentler, smooth. You may also want to try out, I'm not sure if I've shown this yet, the crease, which again you can find it over there. The crease is nice for sort of creating a little more distinction or separation down here between the sort of like ridges, something like that. And yeah, that'll work. The last thing is you might consider flattening down the base, you know, almost because I'll remind you, you're just creating a flat base tree that ultimately will sort of be sitting on top of the ground. So in order to do this, I'm going to switch over to my front view to start. You can just hit the tilde key, brings up this pie menu, and I'll go to the front view. You can also do the side view, and I'm going to do what's called a mask at the bottom of this thing, and hopefully this will work out. That's another tool you'll find over here. I'm going to choose the box mask. Masking, you'll notice when I choose this, see how it just makes a bottom section dark? You know, you can expand it if you want. I'm going to do a little less, maybe this much, and you'll notice it just creates this, again, sort of darkened area. A mask is an area that is unaffected. You'll notice, for instance, now when I sculpt out, see how it's not affecting the masked area. Now I'm actually not going to be using it for that fact. What I'm going to be doing with this masked area is first, let me go back to my front view so you can see this here. First I'm going to do what's called an invert of my mask. You can find a little mask menu up here, and you'll notice invert mask or Control I. Basically now only this is going to be affected. All this other part, which is now black or masked, is unaffected. And then I can switch over, there's some basic move, scale, and rotate tools, and I'm going to go to the scale tool. And you'll notice with this, now I can scale down. See how I'm doing that? To sort of flatten down the base of that thing. I can go back to, say, the draw tool, for instance. I'm going to go to mask, clear mask, and you can see now I've got a flat bottom, and if I want to just hold down the shift key, for instance, I can just sort of smooth that out. And you can see that just sort of gives me a sort of easier to manage base rather than a funny shaped base. All right, I'm pretty happy with that as my sculpt. So I am going to export this, and that's going to allow me to go back into Maya for the next stage, which is, by the way, something I will be showing live during the next class. So to export, I'm going to go back to the modeling tab up at the top here. Make sure your model is selected. Yeah, it's ready to be exported. You can go to the File menu, Export, and you may have a slightly different list than I do, but you're looking for the one that says Wavefront, and you'll see the file type is an OBJ, same kind of OBJ that we've been working with so far this semester. Let me just bring this over here. There's my sort of dialog box or file dialog box for Blender. You'll notice there's a couple of shortcuts over here. There's a desktop shortcut, great. Then a couple of settings here, kind of similar to Maya. I'm going to go down here and just I'll call this tree_high for my high res mesh. You typically want to do over here include selection only. If you don't do this and you happen to have other stuff in your Blender scene, it's going to export everything, which is just going to be a mess. I also recommend going down here to this section that says geometry, expand that, and make sure to deselect or uncheck write materials. Remember, this is just like in Maya. This will just make it so that it doesn't export this MTL file as well, which we don't really need. Export OBJ, and basically that's what you need for the next step, and that should be ready for next class. All right.